He packs rallies across the country. He's leading in the polls. He's about to go back to Parliament. I'm speaking about Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. And today he sits down and talks with us. Hello, I'm Brian Lilley, political columnist for the Toronto Sun. We are at a very interesting point in Canadian politics. We have Parliament resuming, a government that is on its last legs, down at 25% in the polls, 20 points behind Poilievre and the Conservatives, who, according to Leger, have the support of 45% of voters, 51% of voters in Ontario alone. It is remarkable to see. At the same time, we've got the fourth party, the New Democrats, Jagmeet Singh, taking himself out of the costly coalition, as Poilievre calls it, and saying he will not support the government any longer, except he is still supporting the government. In the interview you're about to watch, we talked to Poilievre about this issue, about the coalition, what politics looks like going forward, about housing, immigration, school food programs, and whether he really is going to dismantle the Canadian healthcare system. Pierre, you've asked Jagmeet Singh to cancel the supply and confidence agreement, the coalition, the axis of weasels. You called on him to cancel that. He pulled out of the deal. Now you're calling on him to join you in bringing down the government, but he has come back and said definitively, no, not going to do it. Were you surprised?
Well, everyone should be surprised because he told us that he was out of the costly coalition, which would mean he'd vote non-confidence to trigger a carbon tax election. And now he's reversed himself on that, which means that not only has he sold out the people, he's lied to them. He lied when he said that he had ended the coalition. He's now staying in it, and he's refusing to trigger that carbon tax election. And we know why. You were the one that broke the story. Jagmeet needs to get till next year to get his pension, a $2.2 million pension, and he can't get it if he's defeated in the next election. So he's making Canadians who are lined up in food banks wait. 35-year-olds living in mom's basement because housing costs have doubled under the NDP Liberals, they have to wait. People who are terrified of crime due to NDP Liberal catch and release, they have to wait another year so Jagmeet can get his pension. And my message to him is put goodness before greed. Put the people before your pension. Vote for a carbon tax election now. Jagmeet Singh.
It was called the Supply and Confidence Agreement. Anyone with any sense called it a coalition, and Liberals and New Democrats argued about semantics for the last 2.5 years. But technically, the proper term on the agreement was Supply and Confidence Agreement. I don't know how many times he told us at his news conference here in Toronto that he has ripped up the agreement. He has pulled out of the agreement. Well, if it's called the Supply and Confidence Agreement and you've ripped it up, that would mean you don't have confidence in the government any longer. And yet,
exactly,
several reporters asked him. I asked him 6 times in your news conference the other day. I believe you said it was 31 times.
31 times
since he announced that he's been asked, and he just will not say, "I have no confidence in this government."
That's right. He ripped up the carbon tax agreement, but then he taped it back together, and it's still in place. It's really sad to see someone who claims to be this socialist to be himself so greedy, to put his $2.2 million pension ahead of the people who can't afford to eat, who are living in squalor in the many tent cities that have popped up in places represented by the NDP, tents, encampments that never existed before this NDP Liberal government. He is voting to hike the carbon tax to 61 cents a liter. That's quadruple what it is now, which would just grind our economy to a halt. And so I'm telling Jagmeet Singh, stop it with all your personal greed. It's not the job of taxpayers to pay for your BMWs, your Gucci suits, your fancy watches. It's your job to represent them and do what you said you would do, which is to rip up the agreement for real and trigger a carbon tax election now.
He's trying to position himself. We know the Liberals' support is in the gutter. The NDP support is even lower, according to the latest Leger poll. But Jagmeet Singh's trying to position himself as the only person that can take you on, that the next election is between him and you. And what I found fascinating, since he announced he's ripping up the agreement ad nauseum, is that he not only puts out statements that I've never heard you say, but he's not fact checked on them. So let me ask you about a couple of these. He says that you want to dismantle healthcare in this country. Do you want to dismantle healthcare in this country, Pierre Poilievre?
No, and you don't need to take my word for it because I have a record. When I was part of the common sense conservative government of Stephen Harper, something for which I'm very proud, we increased health spending every year by 6%, which is more than it has increased under the NDP Liberals. And we did that while successfully balancing the budget and lowering taxes for Canadians. How? We got rid of waste. We cut back on outside consultants, special interest groups, and bureaucracy so that we had more money for taxpayers' wallets and for healthcare in Canada. In fact, I'm the only one who has a common sense plan to bring more doctors. We've got 20,000 immigrant doctors and 32,000 immigrant nurses who can't work simply because they can't get licenses, even though they had very successful careers in other countries with similar standards. My common sense plan would create a national Blue Seal testing standard so that we can test newcomers up to our system and get them working within 60 days. That's thousands of extra doctors and nurses, particularly in rural and remote communities that lack them.
I don't have his...
has offered nothing, by the way. And where the NDP is in power in BC, the healthcare system is a disaster. So if you want to look for someone who will destroy our healthcare system, it's sellout Jagmeet Singh and the NDP Liberals.
I don't have his name in front of me, but I spoke to a gentleman from India a little while ago who came to Canada. He was a doctor in India, came to Canada believing he'd be able to practice, couldn't practice, found another way to be successful in business and life here in Canada. And last I talked to him, he was seeking the Conservative Party nomination just outside of Toronto, partly because of this very issue that you're talking about. So that's where things are at.
Well, look, Brian, and people say, well, how can the federal government do this when healthcare and occupational licensing is provincial? Simple. We did it in 1952. It's called the Red Seal, which is a licensing standard for all of the regulated trades. It's been in place now for 72 years. So if we can do it in the trades, why can't we do it in the professions?
It makes sense. They are guilds to try and keep people out. Justin Trudeau is hanging on to power. There's always talk about him leaving. I think he wants to have a battle royale with you. In fact, he said the other day he's looking forward to getting into it with you when Parliament resumes. He is going across the country, though, saying that you are going to get rid of programs that Canadians rely on. Excuse me. And he's pointing to things like the school nutrition program. I called around to several provinces, and the only one that has anything is just a promise to Newfoundland. Newfoundland and Labrador have a promise from the federal government, but there's no program yet. And several other provinces I've spoken to say, we've received a letter asking if we're interested in talking, and that's it. So your answer to Justin Trudeau that you're going to end this program, and how do you take him saying that this is going to save families, implying all families, $800 a month on feeding their kids, when it's actually only going to go to a small sliver of kids in school?
Well, let's start with the fact that after 9 years of Trudeau, we have 2 million people lined up at food banks every month nationwide. In Ontario, it's 1 million people per month. 1 in 10 Torontonians are going to a food bank after 9 years of Trudeau and the NDP Liberals. And according to his own press release on this subject, 1 in 4 kids are not getting enough food after 9 years of his NDP Liberal government. So that's the track record. Now let's talk about the promise. So far, this promise for a food program, which he made years ago, has not served a single solitary meal. Not one ham sandwich, not one apple, not one little bowl of Kraft dinner has been served from this program. The program feeds bureaucracy in Ottawa, not kids in schools. And you mentioned Newfoundland. That's the most hilarious one. So Trudeau sent his minister to Newfoundland to announce this program. It already exists. So they're giving the Newfoundland Liberal government money for a program that existed without that money because it is
It's the
already set
same.
up. So there's no additional meals being served. It's just that Trudeau gets to take credit for a program run by another level of government for which he had no part. And then he gives a check to the provincial bureaucracy just so that he can have a photo op. Kids can't eat photo ops, press releases, or talking points.
Well,
They can't eat promises. They
I'm
eat
sitting
food.
in Queen's Park right now,
Yeah.
the Ontario legislature, and I spoke to the ministry here. It's the Ministry of Children, Family, Youth Services, and Ontario runs a well-funded program, has for years, that works with school boards, local community foundations, businesses, and there's a lot of donations, and then the government matches the donations. And I said, that doesn't sound like something that the federal Liberal government would like. They don't like private sector involvement in things like this. Will they work with you on their program? And the response was, we don't know. I said, how can you not know? They said this program's coming. They said, we have been told nothing about the program, just, will you speak to us? School's already started. By the time they come to an agreement, it'll be the new year or the next school year.
That's right. And I'll tell you a simple way we could bring down food prices. Axe the carbon tax. The carbon tax on farmers and truckers who bring us our food is what's driving up the enormous food price inflation. And this is government greed of Jagmeet Singh and Justin Trudeau. By axing the carbon tax, you make it affordable for farmers to dry their food, heat their barns, and truckers to ship the food to the grocery store. That would be a common sense approach that would give Canadians relief immediately. So if he really cares about food for kids, then axe the tax.
I was given an astounding fact the other day about the carbon tax. Speaking to a developer, someone with decades of experience in actually getting things built. And they told me that to create 1 ton of cement, you need to emit 1 ton of carbon. The cost of 1 ton of cement is below the $170 that the carbon tax is going to. And so they said by 2030, the carbon tax will cost more than the cement will. So it will more than double the cost of cement, which is vital to use in construction of building homes, building schools, building hospitals.
Well, what will more likely happen is that the cement and concrete quarries and factories across Canada will simply close, and they will move to the United States, and there will be shipments of concrete and cement powder coming up from the Americans. We will be sending billions of dollars to them to supply us with essential building materials that will drive down our economy, the incomes of our workers, and the revenues of our governments. The same is true with steel. The carbon tax is costing Stelco in Hamilton $500 million. Under the plan to quadruple the tax over the next 5 years, Stelco's gone. I predict Algoma is gone, and all the steel making in this country will simply move to the United States. And if the tariffs are lifted, they'll move to China, because there's no way you can produce steel. This will be a nuclear winter for our economy. Brian, the finance department says that this year alone, with the 17-cent a liter tax, it deletes $25 billion of our GDP. This isn't Pierre Poilievre's calculations. This isn't, the Fraser Institute or a conservative-leaning think tank. This is the finance department of Justin Trudeau.
Wow.
By 2030, it's $30 billion. And then you would add the second carbon tax, which they call the so-called clean fuel standard. That will delete another $10 billion. So two carbon taxes by 2030 will have deleted $40 billion of GDP. According to the government's own estimates, I believe it will be far worse. Imagine, how do these trucks keep running? Like, how the trucks that pick up parts from a factory and take it to a warehouse, that keep the bits and pieces of our economy going, they can't run on a 61-cent liter carbon tax. They will simply be sold to the Americans, and all of the things they link together in our economy will just stop happening. It will be a catastrophic collapse if this carbon tax quadrupling goes ahead, as the NDP Liberals propose, and that is why it is a carbon tax election. It is the existential question of the election.
I know your staff's probably off camera wanting you to get going. I know you got a busy schedule. Two more questions for you on housing and immigration, and I'll let you go, Pierre. I heard you say something that I hadn't heard before. You said you want to cap immigration and tie it to the housing supply. And I thought, but that's common sense. I know that's your slogan, is common sense. And the Liberals and the NDP are trying to attack you for saying you believe in common sense, but it sounded like that. Explain this idea a little bit for people watching.
Okay, well, I'll just start with the elemental fact that humans need homes. It doesn't matter if those humans are born in Canada or on the other side of the world. If they're here, they need a place to live. They need a roof over their heads. So if you add people faster than you build homes, you'll have a housing shortage. And that's what's happened. Last year, we had the biggest population growth in Canadian history, 1.2 million, and we built fewer homes than we did back in 1972. So think about that. We built fewer homes last year than we did in 1972, when our population was half the size.
Unreal.
So we've doubled the country size from 22 million to 41 million, and we're building fewer homes. That is mathematically impossible. It cannot go on. When I was housing minister in 2015, we built roughly one house for every 1.3 new people that came to the country. So we were actually in a housing surplus, because we have roughly 2.5 people per house in Canada. And so we were building houses about twice as fast as we needed to. And that's why housing was affordable 10 years ago. When I was housing minister, it was $900, $150 for a single bedroom, about $1,100 for a two-bedroom on average nationwide. Well, fast forward to the present, and you've got this monstrous population growth with declining home building. So what I'm saying is, let's create a mathematical formula that sets this year's population growth based on last year's housing construction. So if just, there'll be more detail as we go forward, but just think of it this way. If we grow our housing stock by 2%, then we can't grow our population by more than 2%. It has to be less. And in doing so, we slowly chip away at the housing shortage and make sure everyone can afford a home.
It makes sense to me. I'm amazed it hasn't been thought of or put into practice before. Let me ask you about your housing plan to use federal lands. Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, when the Conservatives ran on this in 2019, they ridiculed the idea. When the Conservatives ran on this idea in 2021, they ridiculed the idea. When you started talking about it, your rallies, they ridiculed the idea. Now they're saying they want to do it. But, and here's the but, they don't want to sell the land to developers to build homes. They want to lease out the land. And they're also using very bizarre parcels. I mean, this is something the Canada Land Company has been doing for years. I used to live onto a whole subdivision that was built behind my townhouse in Ottawa that was built on government land. But Justin Trudeau took your idea and said, let's do what Pierre's talking about, use government lands, but we'll lease it. You will own nothing and be happy, seems to be his philosophy on this. Why do you prefer your plan, which he says only helps greedy developers and screws over taxpayers? Why do you prefer your plan to his?
Well, because it gives Canadians what they want, which is to own a home. And this is a big, this is a really important insight into Justin Trudeau's radical ideology, where he says he admires Fidel Castro and the basic communist dictatorship, and he admires the WEF, which says you'll own nothing and be happy. He doesn't want you to own your home. He wants you to live in a government housing project. And so I'm saying, no, people want to actually buy the home and own the dirt and build a future, not live as a permanent tenant to the government in Ottawa. Can you imagine that? Like, Justin Trudeau wants you to be a tenant of the federal government. I want you to own your home. That's the big difference. So, Trudeau says private developers are scary. Well, every suburb in Canada was built by a private developer. Who does he think built Mississauga and Brampton and Barhaven and Southwest Calgary? Well, it was developers. And sure, are they going to charge as much as they can? Yes, they will. And what stops them? Competition. Having as many developers as possible competing with each other for buyers. The more they're building, the more they have to lower their prices to sell their homes. So that's one of the reasons. When I say build the homes, it's actually not really great news for the developers, because they have to compete more when there's more supply. It's good news for the buyer. So I want to rapidly sell off 15% of all federal buildings. That's 6,000 buildings and thousands upon thousands of acres of federal land. And I'll put a covenant on it that land and those buildings have to be turned into housing, or the government will get the land back. That's a basic covenant you can put on the sale of any asset. And we'll do it fast. That's how we're going to build the homes that people can buy. And my common sense plan: axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, stop the crime.
All right. Parliament resumes Monday. Justin Trudeau says he's looking forward to mixing it up with you. I assume you feel the same way.
Well, there's no better way to mix it up than to have a big old carbon tax election. So, Justin, if you want to mix it up, let's call that carbon tax election, and let's have a big choice for Canadians, a referendum. 61 cent a litre carbon tax under you, or axe the tax under Pierre Poilievre and the Common Sense Conservatives. Let's mix it up, Justin.
Pierre, thanks for the time. Talk soon.
All right. Thank you.
Let us know what you think about what you heard from Pierre Poilievre. Let us know what you think about the current government and when you want an election. Drop a comment down below. Please share this on social media wherever you can, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.